Hey, welcome everyone. Um, Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you're joining us in from. I'm David. I'm a solutions consultant here at PriceLabs. We'll kind of get started with some introductions and housekeeping items as people trickle in. So I'm joined with, of course, our one of our co-founders, Richie. He
Yes.
and I will be tag teaming today. This is going to be recorded, so that question comes up. So we'll just try to check that one off the list. Now this is being recorded. It's going to be made available on our YouTube page, and we'll email it out once the recording is generated later. As far as housekeeping items go, uh, if you have questions, we ask that you use the Q&A box for that. Chat is also available. That's kind of more for general comments. Maybe you're not hearing as well or that sort of stuff, right? Technical issues or something. But keep the Q&A box for questions. We do have people monitoring that on our team, so they'll be able to answer your questions. We plan on the content of the webinar taking an hour or less, and then we'll stick around for questions after as well. We will send out helpful links in the chat. And we are going to do some polls. Actually, we're going to start with a couple of survey polls. So feel free to get those going. Somebody from our team is going to launch that here.
It's live.
All right. So you should see polls up on your screen. Go ahead and answer those. We're just trying to get a feel for, how you're kind of anticipating if you're coming into a slow season or a downturn. Just kind of give us an idea on where to take things with the webinar today.
Very cool. And I see there are some people still funneling in. Hey guys, we have just started. We're doing a poll. You'd see one up on your screen as you're funneling in. Please do help us answer that poll so that we can get a sense of who's on the call and some of your goals. Of course, also thank you for filling in the form. That helped us get a sense of who's going to be joining the call and some of your questions. And hopefully we try to answer those questions as we go through the webinar. We'd probably take another minute just to make sure and see people funnel in, and then we'll get started.
Yep. And just as a reminder, we do have handy resources available. I think we're going to share these links in the chat, but we have a huge knowledge base. So today, like we're going to cover topics in PriceLabs probably pretty quickly. It's not necessarily a how-to webinar. We're talking high-level strategies and those sort of things. So if we talk about a topic and we don't go into enough detail, just search our knowledge base. We have live trainings. You can use our support channels as well. We've got chat. You can email us, and we'll talk about a couple of these newer features as well that you see on the screen. Okay. How are the surveys looking?
Cool. I see about 67 people on the call. 40 of you have given us answers. Um, I'm going to pause the poll and just present results, and then we can continue. So yeah, about 40 of you gave us your answers. 30 of you are experiencing some level of slowdown. Many of you are worried about low demand, low occupancy, and price competition. And it seems like the key goal that many of you are focused on is increasing occupancy. That's kind of a good segue into just setting up the intro for this webinar. Usually sorry, one step back, David.
Sure.
Usually around October, we start seeing several markets go into the shoulder season or the low booking season, right? This is not abnormal. This is usual in a lot of markets. However, I do want to add that this year is a little bit different in various parts of the world. There's, of course, rumors of possible slowdown in economy. There are things happening around the world in geopolitical terms, right? And we're also coming off from a few years of record performance in various markets, right? As a result of which, how we perceive the current year can differ. Thus, regardless of whether there is a real slowdown, whether things happen or not, what we do know is that markets always change, and it's better to be proactive than to be reactive, right? If all of you have chosen to work with PriceLabs, you're already part of the way there in being reactive, right? Sorry, in being proactive. But also through this webinar, we want to cover certain strategies, certain toolkits, certain tactics that you can employ, and data that you can use to shape strategies as you think about the slow season or the shoulder season. As we go through the webinar, we're going to touch on a couple of KPIs. Usually, this webinar is meant for larger property managers. So assuming most of you are familiar with these KPIs, but we're going to talk about occupancy percent, which is like number of nights that are booked, your average daily rate, the price that you're putting on your property, RevPAR, which is actually the price that it gets booked at times the occupancy percentage, length of stay, how long are you taking bookings for, and booking window, how far in advance you're getting these bookings, right? We're going to pause quickly on this slide for 5 more seconds. Familiarize yourself with these KPIs, and we're going to move into and talk about our next set and pass it on to David. David, take on.
All right, thanks. So these are got a lot of great questions, like Richie said. So these are kind of the top three categories, I guess. So tools to analyze the market and competitor trends, pricing strategies and adjustments, and then leveraging pricing tools to encourage bookings without hurting pricing during your peak season. Okay. So these are kind of the main areas we're going to focus on today. And so that first one about analyzing market trends. Kind of the key 6 tactics we're going to break this down into is first, don't panic. We're going to talk about understanding your market occupancy patterns, how to communicate to owners early. That's the key. Using PriceLabs toolkits, we'll go into these discounting strategies, restrictions, and opportunities outside PriceLabs, and then how to review your market and performance periodically. So jumping into that first part of, easier said than done, right? Don't panic. Understand your market occupancy patterns. I'm going to break this down into how you can get, drill down into a specific listing, maybe like bulk listings at a time, and then kind of group trends. So first of all, the neighborhood data tab, this is found on your listing level calendar. At the top of the calendar, you'll see these different tabs. If you click on neighborhood data and you scroll down, you'll see the second chart is the occupancy chart. So I'll kind of go through this real quickly. What I've done is I've enabled both these checkboxes at the top. So it's showing current year data and last year data. The red line is market occupancy, and it's usually by default going to be your nearest about 350 properties of a similar bedroom size. So this is kind of occupancy already on the books. Looking forward is that red line. That gray solid line that pretty closely follows it is basically last year's version of the red line. So if we were looking at this last year, we'd be saying that that gray line would be the red line, if that makes sense. So same time last year, it's used so you can see differences in pacing patterns. So for example, I would be trying to spot or identify areas where my red line for this year is either behind or maybe even above last year, and just kind of see, okay, is the market following similar trends? In this example, I would say in general, it is following pretty similar trends. And then I would try to pinpoint areas, like I mentioned, where it's different. So, for example, this coming weekend here, my red line's a little bit lower, not a lot, but a little bit lower than the gray line. And if I don't have bookings yet, do I want to try to be a little more like I want to look into it, right? Is my minimum stay too restrictive? Is my pricing too restrictive? Right? Those are things we can immediately answer with PriceLabs. You might also want to consider some marketing efforts, right? That's outside of my area of expertise, but those sort of things to get more eyeballs on it. Um, let's see. I also notice like the holiday season looks like last year was much heavier leading up to the Christmas holiday and then dropped off afterwards. Whereas this year, maybe it's a little bit flatter on both sides, or maybe even a little bit more of a, um, there's more interest after the Christmas into the New Year holiday. Again, just trends to notice. Um, as I've been looking at various markets in the US, I've noticed that trend. I don't know if you see it on yours as well, but check that out. Because the reason I point that out is in every like downturn, slow season, there's usually at least a couple of events or holidays that do lead to increased occupancy, right? So you want to make sure that at least those dates, you're on point. Like if your pricing is just way off the charts, you're not competitive, it's going to be harder for you to get booked. But you want to understand, obviously, your target market, your properties, how they compare to the market, right? If they're higher end luxury homes, you're going to be charging the higher end luxury prices, right? But if it's a more of a budget friendly accommodation and you're charging those high end luxury prices, that makes it difficult. Okay. Um, you might also notice there's a difference in peak here. That's just because in the US, this is the Thanksgiving holiday, and last year it was this week. This coming year, it's the week after, right? So just be mindful of those different shifts. Stay ahead of those things. The dotted line here at the top, that's the final occupancy for last year. So it's just an indicator like, hey, if we're pacing how we were last year pretty closely, then we can expect to get about so I'll kind of use this Thanksgiving holiday as an example. It peaks about maybe 50%. And if I'm sitting here about 30% occupied for the market already, we can still expect maybe 20% more of the market will be occupied when that day is come and gone. Okay. So that's a tip on just analyzing it specifically for one listing at a time. I know you might be thinking, great, David, but I manage lots of properties. I don't know how to do that. Like I don't have time to go through all that at once, right? So, um, one way to do it in more, oh, I forgot I added this slide. In the neighborhood data, we also added market history. So if you scroll down, you'll see a chart that looks like this. This is newer. So if you haven't been in neighborhood data for a while, we've added market occupancy, booking windows, length of stay, and ADRs. But you can get a feel for just occupancy in the market and the seasonality, right? Especially if this is a newer maybe a new market for you. This just gives you a good snapshot of what to expect. Okay. So going back to what I was saying, maybe more of doing a bulk analysis, we do have the report builder tool out now. Hopefully you've seen it. If not, I'll kind of give you a quick overview of it. The way you find it is, the top menu bar, you'll go to portfolio analytics, and now it's kind of halved into two sections here. But if you click on Report Builder and then Create Report, you'll be able to build literally like custom reports. You'll check the appropriate boxes. In this example, I'm doing occupancy, which is occupancy of my listings or units. And I've checked, just occupancy percentage, same time last year, and then year over year difference. And then I'm also adding market occupancy. And again, this is going to be those nearest like 300 or so properties, um, similar bedroom size that we're considering for the market. So once you add those in, you can generate the report and it will look something like this. Obviously, I did this for my demo account, so you can ignore the test listings names. I'm sure you have much more creative names than those. But you can now see, okay, listing by listing, I'm at 35% occupancy here. Last year, I'm beating it by 9.2% compared to last year. Sorry if that's a little small, but and then the market is actually a little softer this year. It's down about 3%. So I'm pretty happy that for this listing, I'm doing well. But maybe I can quickly identify properties like this one is pacing behind last year by 8%. This one's really down compared to last year. So I can now then say, okay, let me go do a further analysis of this property, right? And maybe that property I'll go and I'll look at the neighborhood data and see what I can figure out. If it's something to do with my pricing or my minimum stay restrictions being too restrictive, I can make those changes. Okay. So super powerful tool. I'm just showing you occupancy. Up here, I'm showing just the next 3 months. This is customizable, so you can have it be, next month, last 6 months, a custom date range. But this is just kind of my thought of, hey, if I'm looking my slow seasons these next 3 months, how am I looking at a high level? And then I can go do further analysis on the listings that are maybe struggling a bit, right? Okay. I'm going to keep on going through here. Another area where you can identify more broad trends is in our portfolio analytics area. I really like the pacing charts for this purpose. And what you can do when you open up the pacing reports is you can filter them out. Hopefully, you are using tags or groups, ways that you are kind of categorizing or grouping your properties together that are kind of similar to each other. If you don't know how to create tags, that's in the manage listings area of PriceLabs. I'd recommend trying that out so that you can organize your reports in such a way where you can just pull them up really easily, pulling in tags here. You can aggregate it monthly. All that's really customizable. But we have occupancy, ADR, RevPAR trends. When you first launch them, it's just going to show your current, pacing as of this year versus last year if you have historical data. This example, um, the solid line is occupancy for my bookings this year, and the dotted line is last year. So I'm looking here, and I'm a little behind in October, a little behind in November, pacing ahead in December. So I might start asking questions like, well, why am I a little bit behind in November, right? I might look at my pricing, I might look at my minimum stay requirements. And then on the flip side, well, why am I ahead on December, right? Like what is going well there? Can I capitalize on that a little bit more? Um, where I think this gets really powerful, like obviously being able to compare to your historical data is great, but you can also pull in market data. So at the top of the pacing reports chart, we've got, these areas where you can add in a market dashboard, and I'll cover that real quickly in an area in a second, how you can create comp sets. But let's say I put in this Nashville area, I'm looking at all bedrooms or maybe a specific comp set that I created. And now when I add that in, it's not only showing myself compared to myself last year, but the market this year is the red line compared with the dotted line of last year. Okay. So, whereas before I was maybe doing just a little bit worse, now I'm providing a little bit more context and assuming this comp set is, mostly an apples to apples comparison of this group of properties, kind of my target comp set that I'm shooting to mark myself against. I can see, okay, I'm actually pretty well behind. Like, what can I do to increase that to get on par with the market at least. Um, we'll kind of talk about some of those strategies here in a minute, but this is just again identifying the market trends, looking for areas of opportunity, and let's see. I just want to make sure. Oh yeah, I was going to cover quickly the market dashboard comp sets. So the market dashboard tool, you get to it by clicking the market research drop down in the top near the top right corner of your PriceLabs screen, and then market dashboards. Um, Richie said we could give out a market dashboard credit to anybody. So I'm going to throw that plug in. If you're on this webinar live, you can reach out to us and mention that, and we can do a credit. Is that how you want to handle it, Richie?
We'll we'll add it from the backend.
We'll add. Okay, so to registrants, awesome.
Yeah.
Um, but once you're in Price Labs, you'll kind of or the market dashboard. Sorry, once one's created and you've got it. There you'll scroll down, you'll see like a map section, and then this area that's create a new comp set. So within this comp set area, you can filter. If I click this filter listings button, I get this little pop up here, And you can start filtering out for things like bedrooms, even bathrooms if you wanted, the maximum number of guests, star ratings, even things like pool, hot tub, right? And you can create a comp set. We recommend, having as many data sources as possible for the comp sets. If you have not explored market dashboards yet, we do webinars on them all the time. You can find recorded webinars on our YouTube page. So I won't go into the details of that, but essentially, once a comp set is created, you would see it in the top left. There's a drop down, you add it, you apply that filter, and now this market dashboard will show just kind of data for that specific comp set. So maybe I'm looking at like 2 bedrooms, and I can get historical occupancy for the last 2 years as an example. There's other data than just occupancy, but focusing on that for right now. And then I can look at future occupancy for that market as well. But this comp set data then is pulled in if you apply it in the portfolio analytics area, which we were talking about before with the pacing charts. Um, so with that, I'm going to hand it back over to Richie to talk about communicating with owners.
Very cool. Thank you so much, David. So David went into details around various places where you can find occupancy data, your own occupancy data, and markets occupancy data. One of the things that we think is important when you're changing seasons, or your markets in a slowdown, or something's happening, right? It's important to communicate with your owners proactively. So David showed a few different ways that you can look at data. Say in neighborhood data, David had that chart. You could look at it on an annual basis, like so look at the last 12 months or the future 12 months, right? And you can pull the last year final, and if you see that in October, November, there was usually a slowdown. So maybe I can quickly share a screen here, David, to show. Let me see. So for example, if you guys see my screen pop up here, if I am in, this is a Truckee data, and if I'm just looking at an occupancy curve, I see, hey, right around October, November, there is this downward slope that I see. And then I have this 2022 Jan. But then in January, of course, in Truckee area, it picks up and then stays up. There's a slightly slow season in May, and then, of course, the summers are good, right? Now, if you're seeing a similar curve in your market, and you can, again, experience this via, David, sorry, can you have the PDF back?
Of course.
You can experience this via your neighborhood data, how David showed it, or in the report builder, like David showed, you can track columns for 30, 50, 500 listings together, right? And you can create just what last year market looked like by month. You can see a trend to saying, hey, are there certain months that are particularly slower, right? And or through the pacing charts, right? You'd know these findings, right? And these definitely helpful to share with new owners. But also, if you have existing owners that you've had for several years, sometimes it's just helpful to send them a reminder note to saying, hey, here we're heading into a slower season. We've seen that historically, we're seeing it in market data, just as an FYI, right? And I have a personal construct of how I do this on the next slide here. But of course, depending on your choice, it could be different, right? So generally, I would say, like if you're moving from one season to another, maybe you want to start with just a quick note on, hey, how was the high season performance, right? Or depending on which market you were in, but your recent performance. Share data around market trends, and by market trends, I mean either market occupancy that, like I showed you for Truckee market, it's starting to slow down in September, October, like from September into October, November. You can share that, or how David showed in neighborhood data chart, how markets pacing behind. So you can share that. You can share certain market behaviors, whether in the low booking seasons, do you see shorter booking windows, last minute deals, reduced ADRs, whatever things that you see, right? And any insights that you may have on competitive landscape around either property counts increasing or something happening in the market, but just taking that and communicating with the owners on just kind of like a fact book. Of course, depending on the number of portfolios you have and number of units that you have, it can be harder or easier to do across all of this. But maybe you have some of those at risk or difficult owners, and you may want to try this strategy, right? Along with this, if you can jump to the next slide, David, also typically like to add what are we doing, right? So some adjustments that you're putting in place, which right after this slide, we'd get into some of those, right? Some adjustments that you're putting into place, any marketing related focus ideas that you're driving, or any seasonal peaks that you expect in the coming months, right? So of course, there'll be, if you're in US market, there'd be Thanksgiving in a lot of markets. There'd be, of course, the holiday season that would come up. Maybe there are some other peaks in between now and the rest of the year, right? And you just want to remind them of those. That to me is what a good owner email could look like. Now I understand this can be extremely difficult to put together, right? But like depending on if you have certain owners that are hard, you may want to pick and choose certain ideas up according to your own desires and what the right fit that you guys see, right? With that, what we want to get into is so adjustments that you are putting in place, right? So our next part of this webinar, we want to shift focus and talk about the PriceLabs toolkit, PriceLabs features, functionalities that you should be thinking about when setting up for a seasonal change. My part in this is to play the person who says, don't do this. And then David will come and tell you what the right thing to do is, right? One of the things that I do often see is that sometimes there are things that we put in place for high season, which actually end up limiting performance for the slow season or shoulder seasons. And so here's a quick checklist for you to see. Number one, check if you had aligned your minimum prices for high seasons, or if you need to adjust those minimum prices for slower seasons, right? Now, you could have set those minimum prices either at the listing setup level where we set up a minimum price, or you may have set them at custom seasonal profile level, which we'd get into in a little bit. But wherever they are, minimum prices is one of those things that sometimes gets people, especially as they're switching from high season to low season. If you have not aligned based on expecting lower ADRs and adjusting those minimum prices down, it can catch you off guard. Minimum prices and minimum rates are kind of the same thing. But the way I think about minimum prices is essentially I'd open the neighborhood data curve. I'd look at the pricing chart and I'd say, hey, what does the 25% look like? But of course, look at your own portfolio. Maybe you're a 90% percentile portfolio. Then you don't want to look at 25%. Maybe you want to look at 50% or something, right? But look at that neighborhood data chart and say, where do you want to be in that neighborhood data chart on your lowest day, right? Generally, do think that whatever your base price is, you should have 20 to 25% room for algorithm to play in terms of if there is low demand, we can go down enough. Some of you may have adjusted base prices used for high season itself. You may have marked up the base price, or you may have done certain things, right? Ideally, our core advice, don't change base prices, right? Base prices should change based on really if your occupancy is picking up or if your occupancy is slowing down, right? Relative to the market. But if it's not particularly, if your base price tool is not really telling you, or you're not seeing very high occupancies, you should not be adjusting base prices. But in case you had moved your base prices to be really high for high season, take a fresh look at your base price. If you had not done that, that's fine. You don't need to worry about it. But if you had, take a fresh look at those base prices. Number 4 here, ensuring minimum stays. Again, we'll get into how do you do minimum stays by season David will introduce you to all new cool tools. But if you're just using the PriceLabs minimum stay that sits at customization level, whether at listing, group, or account, make sure that you have aligned that minimum stay strategy to your booking goals. Ideally, we'd prefer that you use minimum stay profiles and custom seasonal profiles that David will get into to do this. But if not, if you are wanting to set up for slow season and you want more longer bookings to come in, you may want to think about how do you think about your minimum stay strategy. And then finally, it's possibly a little bit harder to fill orphan gaps, particularly in slow season. It's hard in any season, but it may be a lot harder in slow season. We're going to think about it in two ways. One, by using minimum stays, try to avoid your orphan gaps or gaps in your calendar. But if you do get gaps in your calendar, again, think about how low do you want to be, particularly if you're looking to drive occupancy, because by looking at your neighborhood data, you'd know if you're expecting low occupancy in the market, thereby low demand. Then if there is low demand, you may need to discount to get bookings, right? Final note on all of this, price is not the only variable. So we're also going to touch later after David walks us through custom seasonal profile and pricing profiles. Price is not the only factor, but those are the bullets that I would say make sure if you've made listing level or group level changes, where your minimum prices are at. Have you set them too high? Did you play around with base too much during high season? And do you need to more rationalize it? What should be through the average of the year? Your minimum stay strategy, if you're trying to drive longer bookings, or if you're trying to do something different in shoulder season, make sure your minimum stay strategy is aligned. Ideally, that one in particular, I would say you should use custom seasonal profile. And then orphan gap pricing, that one, again, it's harder to fill gaps. Try to avoid gaps via minimum stay. But if not using orphan gaps, we should, in that case, we should try to have a lower threshold of our price so that we can actually get a booking. With that, back to you, David, on custom seasonal profile and pricing profiles.
Cool. Thanks, Richie. Awesome. So custom seasonal profiles, you may or may not already be familiar with them, so I'll kind of explain where you go to enable those. It's just in the customizations area, so whether you're doing it at like a listing or a group level, you'll see the little pop-up here and the customizations window, right? It's found under Smart Presets and all customizations as well, but you'll pull up Custom Seasonal Profile, you turn the toggle on, and if you click Edit Profile, then you'll get, well, it won't look like this yet if you haven't built anything out. But as you build it out, you will tell PriceLabs, the question is, do you want a fixed or percentage change? It's talking about to your pricing. Do you want to do just like fixed changes, fixed currency amount, or percentage changes on your pricing? And as you can see here, we can adjust minimum price, maximum price. We can also change things for minimum stay, pricing profiles, which we'll get into. And you'll simply just enter in a season name, whatever makes sense for your operations. For this one, I put summer. You put in the dates. I do want to point out you don't have to put in a date for every date of the year does not need to be filled in the custom seasonal profiles. When you set up your listings, you set up your listings minimum price, base price, minimum stay. I'm going to call those the default settings. So anytime that I don't have a date specified on a custom seasonal profile, the default is applying. I'm creating a custom seasonal profile to say, hey, for these dates, I want to do something different than my kind of default strategy. So for example, for summer, I guess I've raised my minimum price by 35%. So if at a listing level, my default is $100 minimum price, I've set that at the listing. Um, during this May 20th through August 31st time frame, my minimum price would be bumped up 35% or $135 in that case. Okay. So that's kind of a way for me to do that. On the flip side, maybe during my slow season, I'm willing to drop it down 25%, which is what I did in this example. Okay. So custom seasonal profiles again can be very powerful, even just with adjusting like your minimum price. Some people don't adjust their maximum price. That's fine, or don't even set it. If you did, you could adjust it here as well. And minimum stay profiles and pricing profiles. We'll kind of jump into that next here, but again, that's kind of just the basic framework is I'm defaulting whatever to my regular settings, but for these specific dates that I've specified here, I'm going to make certain adjustments. And you don't like you could do one of these, all of these, some of these, a combo of these. And what I mean by these is I can adjust minimum price, I can adjust my minimum stay profile, right? I don't have to do all of the options that are available if I leave something blank. Like here, if I left the minimum stay profile as none, it doesn't mean there's no minimum stay that's happening. It's just that the default that I've set, whether it's at the listing or the group is applying, and I'm not adjusting it for this time of year. Okay, so let me just kind of jump to this next part. So minimum stay profiles.
David, if I
Actually,
can step
yeah,
in 1 second, right? I do
please.
want to add the custom seasonal profile is more of an option of control. It's not a necessity that you need to set it in, right? If you could go back to the last slide, David.
Sure.
Um, Oh, yeah, right. So it's not necessarily a need that you need to set minimum prices in or you need to set max prices in, right? It's just that some portfolio managers, some revenue managers prefer to have certain controls, right? And this is how you can get control by season. Like so, not a necessity. If you're looking at this webinar and saying, "Oh, I'd rather let PriceLabs control most of this," that's fine, right? And PriceLabs automatically adjust for your seasonality. Minimum price is more like your insurance or protection, right? You don't necessarily need to have a minimum price or have a minimum price by season, right? PriceLabs automatically will adjust down from your price base price, right? But it's just more of an insurance if you wanted to have that, right? And minimum stay profiles, though, that's one I would say I prefer having them because especially if you're in a very seasonal market.
Yeah, for sure. So with minimum stay profiles, I'll kind of share the tool for a second here. Uh, the way you get here is you go to customizations, and then you'll see these two tabs at the top. If you go to profiles, you'll see min stay profiles. If you don't see pricing profiles yet, it just means that this is what we call a grant feature access. It's still kind of a newer product, so we haven't rolled it out to everybody. If you don't have it, just reach out to our support team if you want it enabled, and we can enable it for you from the back end. But for minimum stay profiles, if you have some already created, they'll be here. If you need to create one from scratch, you'll just do it right here. And you're obviously going to want to know about your occupancy trends, even your booking window trends, and length of stay trends, which we didn't really go into detail yet, but you can find that information in those same areas I was talking about in the neighborhood data tab. We've got length of stay, and those sort of things, booking window. But you'll just give it a name, whatever, again, makes sense for you. If you want to call it slow season, slow time, 2 night minimum, whatever, right? And then you just literally start building it out from scratch. So maybe this is you did your research and it's you want to start out as a 3 night minimum, and then you want to add in your gaps, right? And Richie, I don't know, do you want me to go into detail of like creating one or not at this point?
Sure. I mean, I think it's fine. Don't have to create one, but we can probably talk about how it works, right?
Yeah. Okay. Sounds good. So if we found okay, 3 is good, but we want to allow gaps. I know some operators are opposed to allowing 1 nights, but maybe you are okay with that during slow season, right? And maybe if you're going to allow it, then you want to add a premium to it, which we'll get into in a minute. But here you would just set that maybe I am going to allow 1 and 2 night gaps. So length of gap, whether it's a 1 night gap length or a 2 night gap length, we're just going to require it to fill that length of the gap. Okay. And then maybe we're going to lower it down to a 2 night once we get within, again, if we're looking at our booking windows, and maybe it's a 21 night booking window. We're within that time frame and we want to just start filling. Maybe we started at 21 or maybe we started at 15. Maybe we want to hold that for maybe a week and then start lowering it down to the 2 night. Okay. So this is how you can be a little more flexible with your minimum stay strategy. Maybe during your peak season, it's a longer minimum stay and you can kind of taper these down, right? So anything you want to add on minimum stay, Richie?
The one thing that I would say, we're not going to cover this specific strategy on this call, but many of you may think about switching from a short term to maybe a mid-term, or I think I always confuse this, but in Florida, I think people call it the snowbird season, or no, probably
Yeah,
not, something like that. Is
you
it?
got
Yeah.
it. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So some of you may be thinking about switching from um, your regular short term to maybe slightly more longer term or mid-term strategies, right? And so that's where this can really come in, where maybe you're thinking about, hey, I want to be David, probably you have a better idea of what snowbird looks like, but maybe yeah,
Maybe like
14
a
nights and
14.
14
Yeah.
nights, right? Rather than driving those 3 night bookings. But yes, still in the last minute, if I've not received a booking for those dates, I may drop it down to something 2 nights, 4 nights, something like that, right? And uh, far out, I'd probably still keep it at because once you set that strategy, it'll also apply to next year's slow season. Maybe I'd create a far out, which is like outside of 180 days. I want it to be 30 nights, making this up, right? But that way, like when you're today setting up that strategy, if looking into the future, it'll be 14 nights. In the last 30 days, it dropped down to 7 nights. In the last 15 nights, it'll drop down to 2 nights. And then outside of 180 nights, it'll be 30 nights. But what David's also going to do, and David, sorry if you've already done this, have you already applied this profile to a season?
I have not. So
Okay, let's do it.
uh, let's do it. All right. So I'll do it to, I think this one has listings in it. Snowbird. Doesn't have to match the name, but just so it's easy to follow along, we'll just say October through before Christmas. And then to apply it, you just go to this drop down and you'd find snowbirds. And do you want to like show it on a calendar? Is that what you're? No.
I think just this much is fine.
Okay, perfect. So now it's applying, I'd click finish profile, save changes. And now if you were to go look at this calendar, do a save and refresh if you're going to go straight to the calendar, but you would see October 1st through December 19th, the minimum stay requirement would reflect what we set here. Okay, so that's minimum stay. The other thing I'll add with Richie, if you are doing something like a hybrid, midterm kind of strategy during your slow season, which I think works great in a lot of markets. I know a lot of operators that'll kind of switch to more of a, maybe they've got relationships with insurance agencies to, house people while their house is getting fixed up, or traveling nurses, right? You just want to make sure your pricing is also then reflecting this minimum stay requirement. Because if you're requiring a longer minimum stay, but your pricing is still like going up on weekends and up on Thanksgiving or whatever, right? Like you might price yourself out of the market. So you could either set weekly discounts to kind of offset that, monthly discounts, or in PriceLabs you can just adjust, which is kind of what you can do here is maybe you want to adjust your maximum price down a bit. Um, to kind of accommodate for that. So your pricing isn't fluctuating so much. Some other things we'll talk about next are the pricing profiles, which leads into that pretty well. If you click on these three dots, you'll see some extra options, and I'm going to check this box for add pricing profile. And then now that's where you'll be able to add a pricing profile. Another pro tip for either of these, maybe you haven't like gone over to this area and built out a profile, then come back over here to apply. You can create a profile right from this area as well. So I'm gonna, yeah, let's just do it from this area. Um, so uh, basically, what a pricing profile is it's these what it is that 8 settings that I can adjust for the season. I'm trying to zoom in a little bit, but it's not working. Um, all right. But we would give it a name, so we'll just call this. Well, let's continue with the snowbird theme, but I'll talk through other examples as well. Um, so again, think of this is only applying to these specific dates that I want it to in the year. Maybe I want to be more aggressive with my discounting for this time of year. Maybe I want whatever, right? So we'll talk through these different options here and different use cases. Richie, let's kind of make this a little interactive, so feel free to jump in if you want to add
Yes,
anything
sir.
as I'm going through.
Yeah.
Um, so with customized last minute prices, um, maybe your strategy is I'm not doing the snowbird thing. I'm not doing the increasing the minimum stay. I'm willing to drop my minimum stay. I'm willing to drop my price. I just want to get somebody in there, right? Um, so we have options here. You've got like a flat percentage, a gradual percentage, or no last minute. Um, I'm a big fan of the gradual, but flat would just be like if I did maybe I'm going to get real aggressive. I know I'm going to stop at my minimum price, so I'm just going to maybe try to get down to that. If I did a flat 50% over the next 15 days, each day over the next 15 days would see a 50% adjustment down on the algorithm, right? The difference with gradual is if I did a gradual, this 50% would be spread out over those 15 days. So 50 divided by 15, whatever that number is on the spot live. I can't do math. But it would add that percentage each day. The same day would be the full 50% discount. So it kind of gradually adds that
Yeah.
amount. Um, Maybe Richie on the snowbird
Yeah.
side. Go ahead.
Yeah, I'd want to step in once again as a reminder. If you have this turned off and it says PriceLabs default, no, market recommended,
Hmm.
what PriceLabs remind? Yeah, if it says that, then every time we are looking at and saying, hey, what should the last minute discount be right now, right? And for slow season, it would be different than high season, right? Having said that, if you're looking for more control, like one way to think about it is in high season, you're getting a lot more bookings in. There's a lot more demand. You want to have shorter last minute booking windows. So you may say, hey, I'm only going to discount in the last 5 days, right? Making this up, all hypothetical. Of course, it depends on your market, right? But in uh, in a slow season where there is very little demand that's coming in, and you want to capture it as quickly as possible when it comes in, you may want to say, I'm going to start adding my discounts within 30 days rather than last 5 days, right? So that's if you're particularly controlling your last minute prices, if you're overriding PriceLabs' algorithm through some of these customizations, these pricing profiles can particularly be helpful as you think about what your high season versus your shoulder or low season profile should look like.
Yeah, good point. And we kind of talk about this without saying the words, but lead times, booking windows, like those are going to change by your season, right? So you might be in a market that gets very last minute bookings, like within a week, and maybe you still want some discounting, but you want to control when that's going to start. Um, this is a great setting for that. And I like that you pointed out on maybe on the peak season, you want to have a different strategy, right? Like be a little less aggressive, or maybe not even like one of the options is no last minute adjustment, right? Like you have that ability to override, kind of like Richie was saying, what the Price Labs algorithm is doing, right? These are those human control factors for it. All right, let's go on to occupancy based adjustments. Um, Basically, there's a default option. I'll kind of pull this up. Um, Hopefully you've seen this grid. This is the default that PriceLabs is doing in the background. If you haven't already kind of set your own, this is typically what's applying. We have other kind of pre-built options. Well, let me kind of back up real quick in case you're not familiar with this. We've got occupancy going down the side here, and then day ranges along the top. So 0 to 15 days, we'll just kind of say it's the next 2 weeks. If I've got 7 nights booked for a property, the other 7 nights are available. I'm at 50%, so the other available 7 nights are going to see this -5 adjustment on the algorithm. Okay, so it kind of follows this grid. On the flip side down here, if we're booking up maybe too fast farther in the future, we're going to add some small premiums. That's the default. Okay. We have like an aggressive option, which just gets more aggressive with the discounts and a little bit more aggressive with the premiums. And then there's also like a super aggressive. Um, I also have operators that I work with that like to set their own custom one, right? Like this can be downloaded. Um, and where you can work on it in Excel and kind of create your own columns. Maybe you want different day ranges or things like that, or think of it in terms of a slow season. If you're, at X% occupancy over this certain day range, do I want my pricing to kind of be discounted or not adjusted based on this occupancy trend that I'm seeing, right? So, um, again, Richie, I'll ask you kind of to jump in. Do you want to add anything on the
Not
occupancy-based adjustments?
not on occupancy based adjustments, but I think some of you worry about, hey, am I reducing my prices too much, right? What if I start getting occupancy, right? So yeah, like occupancy based adjustment is a good tool for that. Even if you've discounted prices too much, not this profile because there's no premium on this profile, but but you may have certain profiles like right here, right? If outside of if at that 31-day mark you've hit 70% occupancy, this profile will start increasing those prices, right? So some of
Yeah.
you are concerned about, hey, what if I'm like setting my prices too low or setting my prices too high, right? This helps you play with your occupancy percentages, right? So if your occupancy percentages start to hit certain numbers, you'd see either further discount or further premium on your prices.
Yeah. And what I'd say is you see how this zero kind of goes up at a diagonal. That zero is maybe your target occupancy for that day range. So if maybe your target occupancy 16 to 30 days out is kind of between that 50 and 70%. Okay, I'm in there. I don't want to make any adjustments. But if I'm under that, then I want PriceLabs to kind of automatically do it. I tell people you're probably like if you're doing manual adjustments, you're probably doing this without realizing that you're doing it, right? Like you're not thinking of it in this grid format, but you're like, hey, I'm looking at my calendar, I see availability, my occupancy is not that great. Let's discount it. If you can kind of think of it in terms of this, you can automate a lot of that for you as well. Um, cool. And then so that's occupancy-based adjustments. Um, Orphan day prices, I know we mentioned that, so we'll talk on that just quickly, but there's kind of a couple different rules or trains of thought with this. But you can set a percentage, maybe you want to be more aggressive on your weekdays versus your weekends discount and then you tell us what these gap lengths are. Maybe it's 1 and 2 nights you only want to be discounting. Or maybe you have owners that are like, hey, I'm willing to be more flexible on my orphan gaps. They probably won't call them that, but we will. Um, but I'm a little hesitant to just like, I don't want parties, maybe is there something we can do? So one option is this drop down, you can switch it to a premium. So you're saying, okay, we're going to be a little more flexible. We're going to allow these orphan gaps, but if we're going to allow them, we're going to have a premium and maybe our weekends we want a higher premium, right? For our 1 and 2 night gaps. So again, thinking of your different times of year, how you might have a different minimum stay strategy if you're going to allow orphan gaps, and then do you want your pricing of those orphan gaps to reflect that, and how does that look? Everybody's going to be a little different, so it's hard to speak specifically, but hopefully those generalities help a little bit. Richie, anything you want to add on that one?
No, I think we've already covered enough on orphan day prices. I would say rest of these are very similar. Like I think can play around, and we can cover it later if someone wants to stick around and talk about any of these, right?
Perfect.
But maybe yeah, ultimately close like how do these pricing profiles show up, etc.
Yeah. So once you have it created, I'd save it. Um, and then it would show up here. There's my snowbird profile, which doesn't make sense because I put it in my summer, but stick with me. And so now those dates again will have that kind of pricing profile applying. If you're on, like, if to kind of to bring it all full circle, if you're on your calendar, um, and this one won't have it because this specific one doesn't have it. But if you hover on a date for those dates, day range that you selected for the custom seasonal profile, you'll see like in parentheses if there's a pricing profile applying or a custom seasonal profile. So that's kind of how you would check and just make sure that it's doing what you were expecting it to do. If you're doing it right away, click save and refresh. So that way it's pulling in the latest change. But that's kind of what I would add there. So yeah, let's get back into the slides then, right, Richie? So we talked about those. All right. And I think you wanted to cover this, right?
Yeah. But before I dive into this, just one like taking a circle back on the PriceLabs toolkit itself, right? The custom seasonal profile, pricing profile, it's more a control if you want to add more control, or if your properties or your choices you think differ from what the typical market is, right? PriceLabs automatically adjusts your seasonality, adjusts your discounts based on what's happening in the market, right? But normally we do see larger users, and I believe most of the people on this call have 50, 100 plus 200 properties kind of stuff, right? You may have a certain criteria or certain way that you want your revenue to fill up, right? And based on that, you may want to think about how do you create those pricing profiles, attach them to seasons, and then attach them to those seasonal profiles either are at your group levels or are at your account levels, and if really needed at your listing level, right? But ideally, you may want to have them at group or account level, given that most of you are large users and you have multiple properties. You ideally don't want to be doing this at each listing level.
Yeah.
Um,
Start
we
simple. That's what I'd say too. Start simple.
True, yeah.
Like
Start
don't
simple if
turn
you're
on all the
not
toggles.
exactly, right. And if you're ever in doubt, please do email us, like send us a screenshot of what you're trying to do. We can help you, right? Um, and then also just a reminder, if you think, hey, CSP and pricing profile is too much, completely agree, right? You actually don't really need it. Just a recap on what you're going to do is make sure your minimum prices are not set too high, right? Make sure your base rate is set well. Make sure your minimum stay strategy aligns with how you want your slow season to work. And then finally, your orphan gap prices or last minute prices, etc., are again aligned to how you want slow season to work. Just a reminder though, if you're using pricing profiles, you're not, you don't, once you set it, you don't have to go in and change every season because automatically it would change by season, right? But if you are like looking to simplify and if you just want to change directly in customizations, just remember that when the high season comes up, you may want to change this. Also, within this whole slow season are the peak dates of uh, holiday season and Thanksgiving. So make sure that you're not impacting those dates, right? So that may mean you may need to either break up your seasons, or you may want to, for those specific dates, apply date-specific overrides so that you can increase prices, or you can adjust your minimum sales strategies for those dates. Cool. With that said, you do want to also consider like while we can get pricing right, sometimes you also want to use some promotional strategies, right? There are promotional strategies like using repeat guest discounts, right? Especially if you're in a market where you get snowbird guests, possibly you have already built relationships or you already have a set of emails it's a good time to possibly consider deploying that. Early bird discounts and last minute discounts, we discussed that, how you're going to think about that in context of pricing profiles. Length of stay discounts, again, if you have a sales team that is working with customers or folks directly, you may want to consider adding a larger booking with discounts, but that gives you a surety of revenue. Again, depends on where you're playing. Seasonal promotions, very similar to what we have said, repeat guests and early bird discounts in a very similar way. And then finally, if you have bundles that you could offer, right? Not really our core strength here when we talk about strategies, right? But hopefully those bullets get some juices flowing, and you can start thinking about if any of those apply into your business or your context. Next, I want to say, while we have talked a lot about pricing, what we also see, particularly in vacation rental world or short-term rental world, or whichever way you say it, right? That like it's not like just by reducing prices. If you are the lowest price listing, you may get a booking. Based on our research, what we see is sometimes by being lowest priced property, you may not get a booking because if normally that property and everyone else around for that quality property is priced at $500 and you're priced at $200, that actually creates a mistrust signal, particularly in vacation rental world where there is no real benchmark for quality. The only benchmark for quality is in some ways the reviews that you have. And sometimes if you don't have reviews, new properties, it can be harder. Versus in hotels, a 3-star versus 4-star versus 5-star is very, very clear, right? So because there is no real benchmark of quality in vacation rental world, by being too far away from the market can sometimes not necessarily act as a good signal to drive bookings. In fact, it can act as a negative signal. So while you're thinking about pricing, but please also think about, and as property managers, as revenue managers, work with your teams to think about what other opportunities are you exploring to make sure your business is visible, right? Making sure that you're doing SEO on your direct booking website, or even on your Airbnb, VRBO, Booking.com, whatever portal you're on, right? Make sure you're using the right descriptions, right keywords, etc., to get visibility. If you are using OTAs, again, like list your properties on multiple OTAs. We talked briefly about midterm or driving those long bookings, right? Are you on the right OTAs for that season, right? Are you on wrong OTAs, right? Of course, you should be competitive with pricing, but particularly within pricing, you want to be competitive on cleaning fees and cancellation policies as well. And then lastly, if that's the time in your market where no bookings are coming in, what do? You take that time to implement property improvements, and so that you're ready for back for your high season, holiday season. Of course, your properties have gone through a lot of wear and tear in that slow season, in that high season. Maybe use that opportunity to implement improvements. Cool. Back to you, David.
All right. I'll be real quick on this. We already talked about the different reports. I was kind of talking about them before of how to identify trends, but you're going to use those same reports to monitor your performance, right? One, we talked about portfolio analytics. We talked about the report builder itself, creating your own custom reports. Another area that I did not mention previously is under this KPIs and historic reports section. At the very bottom, there's this thing called listing level metrics. It's a scatter plot kind of thing. You can go by certain day ranges and identify. This one's showing listing occupancy compared with market occupancy, but you might be able to identify, again, this is my demo environment, so I got a lot of low performing test listings here, but you can easily identify to which properties are maybe needing some love and attention, a little extra TLC. for the month of October in this example. But again, those same tools you're kind of using to identify those trends, you're going to make maybe after watching this, you're going to make some changes to maybe minimum stay strategy, and you want to monitor how those changes are affecting your performance, right? You're going to go back and use those pacing charts, those reports that we see here in portfolio analytics. So just kind of wanted to bring that full circle. But that's pretty much what we had to cover today. I'll put a quick plug in. We do have an upcoming Rev Labs by PriceLabs. Kevin and Henry are going to be joining Kyle discussing best practices and reporting for revenue managers in vacation rental companies. So another plug on reporting there. But feel free to, I think we're going to drop the link, registration link in the chat. But for now, we just want to kind of answer questions, right? And really thank you all for attending and sticking with us. We'll stick around a little longer and try to answer some questions. I saw we had a couple in the Q&A that we wanted to answer live. Have you had a chance to kind of look through any of those yet, Richie?
I'm going to, if you're still on the webinar, I'm just also launching a closing poll, will help us understand how this webinar went. But yes, we will be sending you a recording. It will be uploaded on YouTube. You'll also receive an email from us. Is there a way to get minimum price recommendations the same way you do minimum stay? David, you want to answer that?
I will reiterate something you mentioned previously. I do have pretty strong opinions about this one. So, first of all, you want to know what your break-even costs are. So you don't want to lose money on the property, obviously. So you don't want to go below that. But I don't want to set that as my minimum either. I want there to be some kind of a cushion. But to Richie's point earlier, he was talking about using this neighborhood data future prices chart. These the gray area at the bottom of that gray area is the 25th percentile of what people in the market are asking. So I'd kind of use that as a gauge, my break even as a gauge. But once you do set a minimum price, we do generate minimum price recommendations as well. If you haven't seen those, they show up on the pricing dashboard. They also, do they show up here, or is this just base price?
They show
Let's
up there as well.
Okay. This little bell, you'll get some, you have new recommendations. You'll see some minimum stay recommendations there too. But again, I'd caution you of knowing what your numbers are, and obviously you don't want to lose money. But maybe during the slow season you're willing to go low just to kind of get bookings. What do you have to add to that, Richie?
I'm pretty much aligned. Minimum price is minimum price is not really a recommendation from PriceLabs. Minimum stay, yes, does help you drive right kind of bookings, right? And minimum price really is just
A
your
floor.
insurance, your floor to saying, hey, PriceLabs, I'm not sure how low would you go. I don't want you to go below this number, right? Or maybe you have a certain break-even cost that you want to maintain, etc., right? And so, or like you want to not attract certain kind of guests, right? And so that's why you have minimum price. But generally, my recommendation on minimum price is have enough of a difference between base price and minimum price. And if too many of your days are hitting minimum price, you know that your minimum price is either your minimum price is set too low or too high, or your base price is set too low. More than likely, it's that you've set your minimum price too high. There's also a question around a couple of listings renting monthly in my area that have different pricing profiles than other. How can I use PriceLabs for this as there is less seasonality and price fluctuation? Anand, like what you're going to do is you're going to put these properties in different groups, right? So make sure you start with different groups itself. If you have properties that are renting monthly, you want to set them in different groups. Secondly, look at minimum stay, midterm pricing recipe from PriceLabs, and hopefully we can, if someone's on the call and if they can find that. Oh, thank you. I think it's called midterm pricing.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, health particles. Yeah, but midterm pricing, midterm pricing recipe, right? If you find that that's what you can use to, yeah, that one right there. That's what you can use to set up your monthly prices. Ideally, what you want to do is have your minimum price and max price close so that you don't have a lot of fluctuation. If you want to reduce seasonality, there is a seasonal. I should know these names off the top of my head, but there is
Seasonality. Yeah.
seasonality as a customization. You want to reduce seasonality as the customization. You can either choose absolutely no seasonality or just make it extremely conservative. You may want to, if these are monthly, again, for demand factor, you want to reduce that down. And then finally, your minimum stay should be such that it's taking monthly into account, right? If you're doing this all around the year, you just do it uh, at the customization level or at a group level. But if you're only doing part of the year in monthly stays and part of the year in short-term stays, you're going to use custom seasonal profile like David mentioned.
Yeah.
All right. What else is there?
One question is, it's from anonymous attendee. Hi, my direct bookings are directly related or created in the PMS and send to the channel manager as block days. How does PriceLabs read this? How is this reflected in the graphs and reports? That's a good question. Richie can help me, but
Yeah.
the answer is it depends on the connections. But for the most part, generally we read blocks as occupancy. Is that a good rule of thumb, Richie?
Yeah, exactly, right. But very specific question. Generally, you're connecting PriceLabs to your PMS, in which case we see direct bookings come through. If you're only connecting PriceLabs to your channel manager and channel manager does not have that information about that it's a booking versus block days, it's going to come in as block dates, and we may consider that you don't have enough occupancy, right? We may consider it as reduced occupancy. But very, very specific question, reach out to us and we can specifically tell
Yeah.
you about your account itself, right? Yeah, so I'd say reach out to us. David has a question for David. Um, is there a way with customizations for your prices to adjust based on what your competitors are doing? For example, we have a competitor who will dramatically decrease rates by 50% when we get closer to Friday and Saturday. Is there a way where we can set something up to where our rates adjust to those dramatic changes? Um, do you want to
Yeah,
answer that?
sure. So I guess the short answer is we don't necessarily price match to your competition, but we do provide tools for you to hopefully be able to quickly identify that. And if you wanted to change some kind of strategy to reflect that, you could. If they're near, hopefully they're close enough where they're in your neighborhood data comp set. But even if they're not, if you scroll down here, um, you can add in this. You can click show map and it'll show your nearby competitors. Um, but this competitor calendar, you can add in specific listings, and then you can see down here kind of your rates compared to theirs, right? Um, that kind of stuff. So it's, I guess to answer your specific question, like no, the customization won't match you to their rates, but you can add them to this comp set, competitor calendar, I guess, and be able to kind of monitor it easier here than maybe in, checking it on Airbnb. It's kind of here in one place.
Yeah. Generally, our philosophy on this, and we're constantly reviewing it, but our philosophy on this has been there is a lot of mispricing in vacation rental world, and so we don't want to benchmark to certain markets, certain individuals, right? But instead, we look at what's happening in the market and price accordingly. Then, yeah, I mean, perhaps this competitor is dropping prices, David, but maybe they don't realize there is an event happening in that time, right? So it's good to see what they're doing, but not necessarily blindly follow. Maybe we'll change that stance at some point, right? But today we don't follow competitor prices.
Yeah. Do you
Uh,
want to end the poll and share those results?
oh, I'm sorry, I've forgotten where it is. Yeah. Here you go. So I am sharing results. I'm not sure, David, if you see this. 61% of users had not looked at Report Builder. I'm hoping you're going to look at Report Builder again. When we send out our closing email, we'll also include a link to our Report Builder deep dive. But David, can you show where Report Builder is quickly on your screen?
Yes, good point. So portfolio analytics and then report builder. We have kind of some pre-built options you can modify, or you just click report builder. Um, you know, again, pre-built options you can modify or create report, and it's going to give you kind of just experiment with it, right?
Yeah. Yeah, nothing to lose, right? It's just
Yeah,
it's
there's a
not going to
little,
adjust your prices, change your prices. It's just going to show you your data, right?
yeah,
Custom
you
seasonal
could,
profile, 33% said haven't tried it before. So hopefully some of you may want to try it after this. 37 of 37 said this was helpful. Um, Taking it with a pinch of salt because there were a lot more people on webinar who did not give feedback, but also some people gave more detailed feedback, which we'll look into. Um, again, some more questions. Is there a way to allow monthly break-even pricing? Not presently, but we'll look into it. If you could reach out to us on, we've reached out as anonymous attendee, but would love to chat as to what you're thinking about it in this. And then Nicholas, is there a way to see reservation data over a certain period of time? For example, I wanted to see. Oh, yes. Yeah. So what go to go to portfolio analytics, and can you go to KPI historic reports, and then scroll down to, I'm blanking out, but stay date reports, or what is it called?
oh yeah, trends by stay date, booking
Yeah,
creation date.
no, by booking creation date. Yeah.
Okay, give me a second. Is there, are there any other
Yeah.
questions?
I think that is it. We still have some people on the call. If you have questions, please feel free to ask. We're happy to answer these. We're here for another couple of minutes. If not, thank you so much. But Nicholas, if you're still around, while this is loading, trend by booking creation date at the right side, where it's you can do this daily. So you'll see all the bookings that, of course, David has a crazy number of bookings happening here, but you'd see what the revenue was and what the ADR was. But also towards the right top where it says more options, you could download the raw data of CSV if you just wanted to look at the CSV, like quite literally by reservation itself, right? But if you wanted to just understand at a high level what's happening, you could do it through these charts.
Yeah. One other area I'll add to that, if you kind of just want a running list, you can add metrics up here on the dashboard or in multi-calendar. And maybe you want to see, I got a bunch in here from examples, but you mentioned bookings specifically, but we've got options here, right? Like bookings pickup or nights booked in the past 7 days, right? You can add these columns to your dashboard. Uh, yeah.
Fantastic. Okay. Cohen slipped last minute in. In a market that relies more on Booking.com reservations than Airbnb, how does PL take into account? I understand market as don't include Booking.com. Difficult for estimation potentially owners in these markets. Informations. Cohen, one, we will be looking to add Booking.com data. I don't have timelines on it, but we'll circle back on that. Secondly, how we think about this is if you've received a booking on Booking.com, you're still going to see it as an occupancy on Airbnb. whether it's blocked or booked, right? But you're going to see it on Airbnb, and that helps us determine what's happening in the market, right? But I understand estimations for potential market owner or potential owners is a little bit difficult, but we'll work on those and we'll follow up one-on-one. Go on. All right. Ooh, can you provide services such as managing pricing on our behalf? I think there were a few people on this call who could have done this. I'm sorry, I'm not sure how to say your name. But yes, again, send us an email at support@pricelabs.co and we can recommend some options. All right. With that, I think want to say goodbyes here, David? Any closing thoughts?
Thank you. Thank you for joining, and yeah, hopefully it was worthwhile for you, and share this with your friends.
Yeah, very cool. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining in. Hopefully this was helpful. Share it with friends and also anyone you know in the market who's looking for a pricing solution or should look for a pricing solution. But hopefully, jokes aside, like hopefully you found this valuable. If you have questions, please feel free to reach out. At the bottom right corner of the screen, you see that purple question mark. We have a lot of different things in there. You can search for health articles, you can register for live trainings, but you can view our latest updates, and also you can chat or email to us, right? You can chat with us or email us, right? So do that, and hopefully we can continue to help. Thank you. Take care. Bye-bye.